Welcome to Behind the Advisor with XYPN, your behind-the-scenes look at the challenges and victories fee-only advisors encounter as they launch, run, and grow their independent firms. Join us for a deep dive into the real-life stories, frontline insights, and actionable strategies it takes to build a thriving, purpose-driven firm on your terms. In this episode, we're joined by Nannette Kamien, founder of Inspiration Financial Planning. Nannette is no stranger to XYPN. She was one of our earliest members back in 2015, and was on this podcast back in episode 107, which you can find at xyplanningnetwork.com/107. If you'd like to hear more about her career journey through 2017, go ahead and check out her previous show. After a meaningful first chapter as a firm owner, life threw her some major curveballs, and she made the difficult decision to close her firm, work for others, and step away from entrepreneurship. But in 2024, Nannette returned to XYPN with a new vision and relaunched Inspiration Financial Planning in 2025. Today, she's sharing what it was like to walk away from a business she had built, how she found clarity in that process, and why coming back to entrepreneurship on her own terms has reignited her passion for the work. With that, Nannette, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be back.
Welcome back. I cannot believe it has been 8 years since we recorded last time, and it's amazing how much happens over 8 years.
Yes, it really it's been a lot.
I believe it's called the history or the illusion, end of history illusion or something like that. Yeah, but it's a cognitive bias that when I ask you, like, where are you going to be in 8 years from now? You'll give me some derivative answer of where you are today. Like, I'll have a firm that'll be a little bigger and my kids will be a little older and I'll be a little further along in life. But when you go back and think about where you were 8 years ago, it's just like not even the same person.
Right.
It's
not even connected.
So I'm excited for hopefully folks listening will go back and listen to the previous episode. Again, that's 107. And you can kind of hear the different phases of Nannette's life here. So would you sort of, I guess, take a step back and just talk a little bit about sort of the journey to launching and then ultimately deciding to sort of wind down the firm?
Sure. So the very short version is that I was a career changer. I decided when I was around 40 to switch careers to be a certified financial planner. I started taking the coursework. I looked for jobs. I was previously in information technology and had a good job at a big company and just decided I wanted to switch. And so I looked for jobs and there just wasn't anything out there that made sense for me. I had 2 toddlers. I had been working from home part-time back in the day because in IT you could do that. And firms wanted me to come work in their office an hour away, 8 to 5, and pay me $35,000 a year to be a paraplanner. And that wasn't something that I could do. So I started my firm with XY. I was the cautionary tale that you and Michael have talked about, but and it was something that was really important to me, and I really wanted to work with people my own age in the same stage of life that I was, and do it in a really cost-effective manner. I didn't manage assets to begin with, and because I had no experience in that area, and so I just was doing planning, for a fee.
Okay. So talk about, you had a lot of life happen all at once. When we were recording this podcast, you were moving across the country and moving your firm. You had young kids. Since then, we had a 4-year pandemic that shut the world down. 5 years. I don't know how long it went on for. And so, I guess talk to me a little bit about how that experience was and how that played into the decision to ultimately wind down the firm.
Yeah. So I moved from Illinois to California in 2017. My mom passed away. I went through some personal challenges with my marriage where I ended up getting a divorce in 2021. But that sort of started to become an issue in 2019. The pandemic happened in 2020. But in 2019 is when I really started thinking about shutting the firm down. And that is partially because of the personal challenges that I was going through at the time, but also because my business wasn't successful and I was not making very much money at all. And that was from a combination of factors, just partially because I didn't have enough clients. I wasn't getting enough clients. I didn't have the confidence. I didn't have, I wasn't, I sucked. So, I mean, I was a good planner, I think.
Yeah.
It's hard to put myself back in that time frame, but I wasn't doing things that were getting me, from the progression of those very early years that are very tough for a lot of people to the building of a sustainable business. And I was very lucky to be in a study group with Sarah Stanich and another XYPN member, and she had a firm that was growing, and we became, close enough that I talked to her about, hey, is there a place in your firm for me? And basically what I ended up doing was folding my firm into hers in 2019 and working for her firm for a couple of years. And I was incredibly lucky to have been able to do that from the personal side and from the professional side. She had a lot more experience than I did. Her firm was, a lot bigger than what mine was. And it was really great to be able to learn from her and see how someone else was building their firm.
We get a lot of feedback from listeners. They say, we want to hear stories of the firms that didn't make it. And the truth is, it's really hard to get somebody to come on the show and talk about what they consider to be a failure and that transition. So I'm so happy that you've relaunched, because we get to kind of tell the two parts of the story, which is that, I always felt like failure, quote unquote, in our business when you're launching a firm wasn't so bad. Like, we're not a capital intensive business. You're not going into millions of dollars of debt to try to start one. Like, the worst case scenario is you have to go become an associate advisor in an RAA, which is what you're going to do if you don't start a firm. So it's I don't know.
And get paid a salary and be able to count on a paycheck. And that was really, really attractive at that point in my life, because I was thinking, if I'm getting a divorce and I live in Southern California, I'm going to need a paycheck. Like, and at that time, my kids were still fairly young. I mean, they were younger, obviously, than they are now. And that was a no-brainer option for me to take advantage of. And again, like, I don't know, I should maybe do a deep dive in I guess
a retrospective.
Retrospective or an autopsy. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for on what I was doing wrong the first time. But the bottom line is I wasn't doing something right, and I needed to move on. And it was painful to let go of that dream. I was very attached to my brand. I was obviously, because I kept it, I was very attached to the meaning behind it. And it was hard to let that go and put my work behind a different brand.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you sort of that question, which is, what do you think you've learned now that makes now the right time to launch a firm that maybe either you weren't ready for or just weren't successful doing? Like, can you think back and think of one or two things that, like, hey, if I had done those things differently, if I'd known more about that or had more experience in this area? Or do you think it was just the nature of the timing and where you were at in your life?
I think it's just time. I mean, there is a confidence that's built after 10 years of doing this. Okay. But I mean, that's the easy answer. I had no experience. I had no credentials. I had nothing when I started except for a dream. And working for Sarah and then working for the second firm that I worked for after I left Sarah's firm in 2022 was, I got so much confidence in the work and the sales process and just the belief that I was worth what I needed to charge to make, a firm financially viable. I needed time, and having extra life experience doesn't hurt either.
Yeah.
Because I've gone through so many more things. Yes, I had gone through a lot up to age 40, but at the end of the day, I've been through so many more things in the last 10 years that it just makes such a difference when you're sitting in front of a prospective client and you can really talk about the clients you've worked with. I've worked with like 150 different clients since that, I've done all of these things. I've got credentials. It just makes such a difference.
Yeah, there's the old adage that I didn't appreciate experience until I had some. And
I like that.
think
Yeah.
about myself, when I was launching my own firm, I was like 10, 20 years of experience. I don't need that. Like, I
Right.
got this. And then, now that I'm more than 10 years into my career, I look back and I'm like, man, you were an idiot.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh
you
yeah.
did not know.
I look at myself like that too. But I mean, you know what? Good for me. I tried.
Yeah.
There's no shame in trying something and not being successful at it. There just really isn't. And I think we have to let go of that in our society, that there's something wrong with trying and not being successful.
I love that, because it really is the work we do with our clients. Like, we just tell our clients to let go of their career and retire or change jobs or sell their business or whatever these things are. But for whatever reason, and I'm sure it's some sort of cognitive bias, but like, when we have something like a business, we just expect it to be there forever.
Yeah.
And, it's like our identity is this and it will be this forever. And that's just not the case for most people. Like, that's just not the journey. So I guess, how was it? I mean, you've talked a little bit about this and sort of what you learned. I guess, any additional lessons that you learned working for Sarah's firm that has sort of been emboldened you or empowered you to be able to relaunch the firm this time?
Well, here's the one thing I will say. Both of the firms that I worked for were in sort of growth mode and wanted to become bigger and wanted to sort of add a team concept. And through working for both of those firms, I really still firmly believe that I am best serving my clients being just me. I don't have the desire to go out there and build a big firm. I want to build a firm that allows me to pay my bills and put away money for retirement. And maybe one day one of my kids will want to take it over. I don't know. But I'm not out there to go out and build something giant. That's not going to be my trajectory. And it's okay, because there's lots of people out there that are doing that.
Yeah, and that's definitely a different journey when you're in hyper growth mode, and the clients are doubling every year and the team is doubling, and it's just like utter chaos. Like, it can be really fun, and also just like there's a time in the life for that, and it is not always when you have young kids that's a lot of fun. So
yeah,
I guess, was there a moment where you've shut the firm down, you've gone and gotten a job, you've worked for 2 firms, you're at this point, and like, did anything happen, or I guess, was there sort of a moment where you thought, I want to do this myself, like, I want to do this again, I'm going to relaunch? Like, I guess, what happened to kind of push you over the proverbial cliff that this was the right call?
Okay, let's not call it a cliff. Okay, let's call it like the starting line. Okay, let's not assume this is a cliff.
Feels
I'm
like
jumping
a cliff
off
when you jump, but yes, that is fair.
There wasn't one thing. Okay, so obviously I kept my URL from my previous firm. I kept my Google Workspace. I paid for these things for 5 years. Partially because I was telling myself, well, I have to keep the books and records for 5 years. So this is literally what I'm telling myself. I'm like, okay, I've got to keep all this for 5 years. And I wasn't ready to give it up. And then I got, very, very close to the 5-year mark of when I joined Sarah's firm was when I started thinking about it seriously. And I, 3 years post-divorce, even though I was making a good salary, I literally was finally making what I made when I left my IT career. Okay. Okay. So I was like, do I really want to give this up again? But what else am I going to do? So I turned 50 this year. So it was the looming big, milestone birthday. And I'm like, I may not have another chance to do this. And so it just was a couple things that were sort of, gyrating in the back of my mind. And I finally felt like I had the experience. I had a really good group of clients that were mine sort of to take with me, that I felt like I wouldn't go broke right away. So I'm not broke yet. And so it was just a lot of things. And so I had all this stuff, though, that it made it so easy to spin my firm back up. I went to the conference in Minnesota in where whatever month that was, September, October,
Yeah,
last fall.
October or
October.
September maybe. I can't remember. XYPN Live in Minnesota.
Yeah, XYPN Live in last fall. It had been a few years since I had been there, and I just got really excited about the possibilities again, and I was ready mentally to take on that challenge. And it just, again, I knew how to write my own ADV. I knew how to get a website up and going. I knew how to do all of this stuff because I had done it before.
And you had a name and a logo.
And I had a name and a logo.
Those things seem small, but that is just, it's another thing to have to spend a bunch of creative energy on.
Yeah. And and that's why I was like, my name was good enough. And I and I loved that brand and I loved that logo and I just still loved it. And so I was like, why spend money or mental energy trying to recreate the wheel when I can just do this? And 5 years from now, if I need to change the name of my firm, I will. But right now I'm not going to spend time on that.
So you mentioned that you had some clients you were able to bring over. Can you talk any about sort of how that was structured and negotiated with your employer that you would be able to sort of retain those clients instead of it being a lawsuit, non-compete nightmare, which a lot of advisors are dealing with?
So I had brought some clients into my relationships with Sarah when I joined her. I basically brought some of those clients to the other firm that I went to when I started. And part of my agreement was that my clients I could bring with me and clients I subsequently introduced to the firm while I was there, that they were also mine. So that was spelled out pretty clearly, I thought, in the agreement that I signed. Obviously. Well, when you leave, there's always a difference of opinion. And at the end of the day, I think myself and the previous firm owner that I worked with ended up sort of just agreeing to disagree on the language and deciding that it wasn't worth either one of us, going further with any issues. I ended up not being able to bring a couple of the clients that I thought would stay with me, that had been with me since before Sarah.
Oh, wow.
And that was, that's fine. That's fine. Because some of the new clients that I had gotten have referred me business. So you never know when you're making that transition, just because they're your clients doesn't mean they're going to stay with you. And they felt more comfortable with a larger firm. They felt more comfortable with the services that my previous firm was offering. And that's fine. I want what's best for those clients, especially ones that I had worked with for 7 years.
Well, I know we have a lot of listeners that are chomping at the bit at that story, thinking how do I find that? That's the perfect scenario to be able to go work for a larger firm, learn from them, leverage the infrastructure, provide awesome value to the firm, while also building up a client base with the ability to launch. And I hear this from, new advisors joining the network all the time where they say, well, I signed all these agreements, 10 years ago, didn't really read them. And now I'm starting from scratch and that's not fair. And they shouldn't be able to take my clients and all this. But then 5 years later, I talked to those same advisors and they've launched a firm. They've now hired an employee. And what do? They have that employee sign the same non-compete that they signed. And I'm like, no, you can't. You're just perpetuating the cycle. So I get it from a business owner perspective, but if you have that conversation early on, obviously before you sign the agreements, then you really can get something that gets closer to a win-win. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if I ever did it again, I'd be even more clear in the agreement language and I'd have the confidence to fight for that. Because I could have done more to protect myself, but at the end of the day, it worked out okay. And honestly, going into working for that firm was not my plan to go back out on my own.
Sure.
I really wanted a job. I really wanted a job that would just pay me money and I didn't have to think about it. But again, when you're working for someone else, you're doing it their way and you're doing it under their brand and you're doing you're following their vision. And I wanted it to be more of a partnership with that firm owner, and it ended up being less of what I was hoping for. And so I'm like, if this guy can do it, if all these other people can do it, I can do it too.
Absolutely. So All right. So we're at a point where you've launched, you've shut down, you've gotten a couple of jobs, and now you've decided you want to launch your own firm. What did you decide to do different this time than you did with the previous launch that you feel like is setting you up for success, this time around with the firm?
Well, so first off, I went with partnering with Betterment and with GeoWealth for asset management services.
So you're able to provide that service, but outsource a lot of the legwork.
Yes,
that makes sense.
yes. So for me, I realized that I don't want to be doing trading myself. I don't want to be constructing portfolios myself. I know enough now to know that I don't want to do that stuff, but it's a critical part of services that clients need. And everybody can argue whether fee for service only or asset management fees are better. I don't want to get into that argument, but for some people, they absolutely are better off with me managing their investments. And so I knew I had to offer that service.
That makes sense because I guess if they're joining XYPN, all advisors are launching with a fee for service model, and a lot of folks are planning only. And adding AUM, adding investment management is the most common new service added. Yeah. And so I think they experience that where, the passion is around planning and it's like, it's a commodity. Like this isn't really the value add, but then clients need the service. It's like, well, where am I going to send them? Somebody else who's going to try to take them from me or, retail on Vanguard or whatever. And like, those aren't great experiences. So to your point, it can make sense to bring it in-house and then ultimately outsource a lot of that just sort of day-to-day legwork so you're not quite so tied to it.
Yes. And so I had worked with GeoWealth that was First Ascent before when I had my own firm prior, because I ended up adding it in 2019 right before I joined Sarah anyway. And then Betterment, the service had improved so much and we used it in my old firm and it was a good idea to bring them on. I'd love to be able to just use one or the other. But the bottom line is I have clients that would prefer the name of Schwab, which is who I'm using with GeoWealth. But there's clients that are really better served with Betterment, and it's so much easier that it's not that much overhead to have both. So
sure.
That was one major change that I made. The other major change is I'm going to say the word niche.
You can't be on this podcast.
I can't be on the podcast.
It's going to happen.
And not say niche. So, okay. I will have what I call a soft niche. Well, previously I sort of had a niche. I did a lot with helping parents that were having kids that were going to college. I actually wrote a book about it in 2019. I really dove deep into that niche at that time, but it was not a good niche. Okay. It was a bad niche. They didn't want to hear what I had to say. They didn't want the advice that I was giving them. And so I wrote a book to get it all out of my system, and I just abandoned it because they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to pay for the advice. They couldn't afford the advice, and it was a bad idea. So this time when I launched, I'm like, I really am passionate about women who are going through transitions, whether that's divorce or career transitions. I mean, does any of this sound familiar, right? This is my life for all of these years. And, even widowhood. And I got the RICP designation at my previous firm. And so retirement, it's all of these transitions that women are going through that I want to be able to help them through. And so, I mean, women obviously are not a niche, but women over 40 going through one of these transitions, I feel like is narrow enough for me to really focus my marketing and focus my outreach and my clients on and services on reaching that niche.
So are these mostly single women, or are you working with couples as well? Just the woman is leading sort of the relationship maybe?
So I am working with couples. I don't discriminate. If a woman brings a man to the table, I will work with him. But I actually do say on my website, hey, one of my FAQs is, will you work with single men? And the answer is no. I will refer them out to somebody who I feel like better serves them, because that's not my focus. And I don't want to get distracted by, I don't know, not that the planning is all that much different, but I just really want to be able to hone in on working with women. So single women, divorced women, women that are married or in relationships with others, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, it's so funny to hear advisors talk about their niche because we're still in this point where, in a way, we can be like a little ashamed of it, because we're like, oh, it's not narrow enough, or it's too narrow, or yeah. Anyway, it's always a fun conversation. But the one thing that I have noticed over the years is that you have to be narrow enough with your niche that your marketing makes sense, right? Like, we work with everybody is not good marketing, so it's got to be narrow enough. But it only has to be super narrow if there's a lot of competition. And you are working with a client base that there is basically no competition. There are a whole lot more middle-aged women in transition than there are advisors that understand the challenges that they're going through. And so, for listeners that are thinking about their niche, and it's like, you don't have to be so specific that there's only 50 people in the world with that problem. Now, you can do that, and it's a great way to build a firm. But it can also be, when there's no competition, like, you can be a little broader. And if, and you're not trying to bring on 10,000 clients either.
No.
So you're trying to build a firm that supports your lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you actually talk about that and sort of, you're in this new life stage. I think your kids are teenagers now, and just how you're designing the firm to support your own great life that you want to live?
Yeah. So my kids are going to be 13 and 15 in September, which is insane. So obviously the parenting challenges are very different than they were 10 years ago. And I live in Southern California, and which is expensive. And so it's, I need to make enough money to pay my bills, obviously. And that's the first sort of, when I think about the growth of my firm, this first year, that's the goal, right? Is to have enough revenue by the end of the year, forward-looking revenue by the end of the year, that I can pay most of my bills. The bills that are required to be paid, not the e-bike that my son talked us into, a couple of weeks ago, right? That the bills that need to be paid. So that's the goal for the first year, which is very, very different than the goal for most of, I think, the advisors in their first year, because it's way, 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 way higher.
Yeah.
But for me, that's what I have to do, right? So I sat down and I think, okay, how many clients do I need to add? I ended up starting with maybe about 10 clients that came with me. I've added maybe 8 or 9 since then.
Oh, wow.
In the last 5 months. And
that's huge growth.
I mean, it's going according to plan, which is scary to say.
That's awesome. That really is an incredible growth journey for for being 5 months into the business.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, like, I have to build this, right? Yeah. I don't have a choice anymore. I'm not married. I don't have anyone else bringing income in. I got a home equity loan to give me the runway for this first year, because I had to, right? Yeah. Like, divorce doesn't leave you more like extra money around. Okay. And so I have a year to get to pay my bills, and that lights a fire under your butt. And I didn't have that the first time. So that's another thing. So I've got to get to that income. So I'm like, how many clients do I need? What do I need to charge them? How many do I need to add each month, while I'm pulling from savings to support my lifestyle? And that's basically what I'm looking at the first year. And then I'm thinking, okay, the second year, I can slow that down a little bit, but I really still want to be able to do things like retirement contributions someday.
Yep.
Even though I'm probably never going to retire, but that's okay. I have a goal for that second year. And then by the third year, I feel like I'm going to be really making decent money. And this is something that I can do for another 15 years after that. 20 maybe. And when you multiply, I don't want to have more than like 70 clients. And when you multiply that out, that's a nice life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny if I were to go speak to sort of a group of I guess, general employees in their 20s and say, who wants to make, who would be happy making $100,000 a year? Like, every hand goes up.
Yeah.
But if I ask advisors, like, who feels they're successful if they're making $200,000 or $300,000 a year? No hands go up. And so obviously Southern California is a little different. We have some of the same challenges here in Bozeman with housing prices. But it is a reality that like we make so much more than the median household income in the country. Like we really do have the ability, but to make a lot of money, but also like our expectations are pretty high, I think, as an industry.
Yeah. I mean, I want to get to $500,000 in revenue. That's my goal. So
that's awesome.
That's
$500,000, 70 clients. That math checks out.
The math. Yeah. It's like $8,000 a client.
Yeah.
And I mean, one thing I will say is that I love running my own business. Like I am in my books every day. I am analyzing my numbers. I am like looking at my revenue. I'm that part I love doing. So that wasn't ever a reason that I shut down my firm, right? I have an MBA, I mean, this is like what I wanted. I love this part of it. So I'm very in tune with my numbers and where they need to be and what my expenses are and my revenue and all of this stuff. So that's fun to me.
That's awesome. Yeah. And something that a lot of advisors just, we put our head in the sand and don't want to look at our books.
Yeah.
But it is really important. So, as we're coming to the end of our time together, what's sort of one tip that you would give advisors who are thinking about pausing, or maybe they're a little further in the journey and thinking about restarting their firm? Like, if you think about where you were, is there any advice that would have been helpful when you were in that moment?
I think don't be afraid to switch directions. I think as planners, we are really tied to, I'm going to put a plan in place and I'm going to do this regardless of what happens. Okay. And that's been a thing. It's actually a thing that I've become really interested in. I read Quit by Annie Duke. I've read the Tiny Experiments book that talks about, why goal setting is broken and that kind of stuff. And don't be afraid to change directions. If what you're doing isn't working, don't just continue to do it and think it's going to get better. It can, right? Obviously, you have to persevere through some challenge. It's not just going to be easy, but don't be afraid to look for other opportunities and other options and do what needs to happen in order to take advantage of those. Join your friend's firm, find a headhunter that will match you up with a firm you never would have found. I would never would have found that job without the headhunter that I worked with that had that relationship and knew that firm was potentially looking for that position. So remaining open to change is so important.
Yeah, that's awesome. We didn't talk about it earlier, but nothing will get you more job offers than launching your own firm. It's amazing. Like you launch your own firm and you suddenly go from like, oh, well, they'll just be a paraplanner to like, oh, they're a lead advisor. And it's like, the only difference is I wrote an ADV. What's going on here? So that's a little job tip. If you're not finding the right job, just launch a firm and then go get a job.
Well, honestly, I mean, it gave me the experience that I got having my own firm, really led me to working with Sarah. The experience with her led me to that other firm position. It all builds, right? Whether you planned it that way or not. I mean, I really wanted, my previous role was director of planning services. And I really wanted a role with that title because of what I really felt passionate about was the planning. And so that's what I was looking for when I was looking for that second job, was that director of planning services title. And I was told, yes, it does exist. And yes, this is how you find it. So for me, that was the right next step for me. But after having gotten that and working with over 100 clients in those 2 years, I was like, okay, now I can do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. So last question, and that is, if folks want to learn more about Nannette and Inspiration Financial Planning, where should they go for more information?
First of all, my website, inspirationplanning.com. And also, I'm really active on LinkedIn. I post a lot of content that's not like very, financial planning-y, I try to fly my freak flag and be really honest and talk about things that are going on in my life and my work with clients. And because I just want to be able to be myself. And so LinkedIn is really the place where you can find me being me. I try to use Instagram and YouTube, and I'm just not.
Yeah, I'm a fan of LinkedIn myself, so I get it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come back on the show and the vulnerability and willingness to just open up about the journey that you've been on. And it's a journey that a lot of folks are facing, and they think they're the only one. And so I appreciate you being willing to come on and share your story.
Yeah, happy to do it.
All right, listeners, thanks for spending time with us on Behind the Advisor. If Nannette's story resonated with you, be sure to subscribe for more candid conversations with XYPN advisors building firms that truly work for their lives. Want bonus content and early access to episodes? Head over to joinxypn.com/BTA and join our community. Until next time, keep building your firm your way.